The thing I've got to say about this, the chap that played the violin must have been short.
So here we are, Raimondo, in your lovely, lovely home.
Oh.
And yes, we want to talk about your experiences in spiritualism, starting with the Arthur Findlay College. And how did you get into spiritualism?
Well, let's put it this way. I realised afterwards that it was due to spirit waking me up in the early hours of the morning when I was a child. But at the time, I didn't realise what it was. And it was when my father died that I became involved in it. So I didn't know much about the other world then. But I remember now, when I look back, my father, who was a sergeant major, so if he couldn't touch it, hit it, and sort it out, it didn't exist, do you know what I mean? And so he and I used to disagree a lot because I'd be talking about what I felt, and people don't feel things, they know things, or they don't know things, and you can't talk about something you don't know about. And he was a good guy, but very down to earth. And I didn't realise at the time just how much he was. And I remember he died when he was 50. And of course that sort of, what was I now? I think I was 20 at the time, I remember that age. And I remember feeling very much alone. And you do, don't you? I mean, you can imagine, this is what it's all about at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. You suddenly find yourself not able to talk to somebody that you trusted or knew, and you look at something they own, the wristwatch or something, and you realise that was the last time they touched it, and they won't be able to touch it again. All these thoughts come through your mind. Mm-hmm. And when we see people losing loved ones on TV, and you see them being interviewed, they can't get quite to how they feel about it, because it's such a personal thing to lose somebody, whether it be a dad, a mother, or a child. Whatever you lose is part of you, and it has been for so long that you can't just ignore the fact that it's no longer there in that physical form. And that's when it hits you. And then you suddenly realise that there are other doors opening at that time that you didn't realise existed. And so I investigated the spiritualism and realised that I'd had pointers for some years through a grandmother who was a spiritualist. But she didn't make it known to me that she didn't say to me, oh, you should come to the church. She just would occasionally mention something about spirit, and I would sort of listen and think, oh yeah, that's interesting. But I didn't take it any further. And of course, until you do, you don't get, the questions don't come up so effectively. And you ask yourself questions that you don't get answers to, but you put them to one side because you really haven't got time to mess around with that, because you want to get into things that really matter, like earning money and becoming Prime Minister and that sort of thing. And so you suddenly realise that life is not what you thought it was, and you can become involved then with this unknown world that actually is the world that runs this one. And this is the bit this is the confusing thing, because it's a sort of back way round, really. And you suddenly realise that in retrospect, you're learning a lot about that which you should have already and probably have experienced, but haven't been aware that you've experienced it. And it sounds weird, but it comes to the fore at odd moments. And some people call it spirit intervention, which I think it could be. But there's so much to this, because no individual has all the answers. And they can only say, I've been that road, that's my walk, that's the road I took. It may not be the one you've taken, but we may have similar experiences. And where they've crossed over and been the same, you've been very lucky. Because that's double proof to both of you that you have not imagined it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Rather than think it, because you think it and get it wrong. But if you get a double, what I call a double connection, it proves it. You think, yeah, that's too much. That's not a coincidence. That's a fact. That must exist.
So with your mediumship, do you hear spirit? Do you see spirit? Do the You know, is it visual? How is your mediumship?
Well, it varies according to development, really. But I remember I used to see a face come towards me in the darkness, and I'd feel an arm, a hand, touching my arm, and I would wake up. I'd say wake up. I'd suddenly become aware that there was somebody else in the room with me, and I'd cry out because it was a natural thing for a youngster of about 8 or 9 to do. And I would be on my own in the bedroom. So what was happening? But then I'd be so tired I'd go back to sleep. You know what kids are like. I never thought about it anymore. Anyway, that's one way of getting it. But a lot of people will say in my case, my mediumship opened up by sensing things. I would sense they were there. I didn't realise when I used to get it in my bedroom that it was real mediumship. I didn't know what I was talking about or what it was. But they were there, and therefore that was the first opening of the door. But after that, it went on to clairsentience, which was sensing the medium's, the spirit's presence. And then you'd go from that, not necessarily in that order, but it would move into clairvoyance, of seeing an action or seeing an image, which you could then interpret into a meaning. And then there was clairaudience, where you would actually feel, you would hear a voice, sometimes as clear as the one that I've got now, other times not clear, but very much like a memory, like a conscience voice. When you, for instance, when you're driving a car and you do something a bit stupid, you think, well, that was silly, and you correct yourself and you talk to yourself. That is how clairaudience can sometimes come into your mind. It can actually influence the mind by you talking to yourself or thinking that you can hear a voice talking to you. Yeah? Is it making sense?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not necessarily able to dissect it, because to stop at that point and dissect it destroys what you're trying to do, because you're breaking the chain. Anyway, I don't know if this is making sense.
Yes. Oh, it is, definitely.
But there's all those different, and when I do a dem, I get all of them come in at different times. So I can't say to you, I'm only going to do clairvoyance, because that would mean that, yeah, I might just do clairvoyance for a while, but within a short time I get clairaudience. And I prefer clairaudience because it's more accurate.
Mm.
Trouble with clairvoyance is I've got to see it and interpret what it means before I can give it off, which slows it down. You know what I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
But if I hear somebody call out their name, what they died of, then to me, I know I'm right or I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm not going to be bringing the link through, so it's not going to go any further. But if I'm right, it will go well.
It will come round, yeah.
When I make that first link, I often say, I've got Fred here, he died of a heart attack, and he was by the kitchen table when he dropped. And it will come in that sort of detail.
Wow.
And they'll say either yes or no. I mean, to me, if that's not enough evidence, then you might as well pack it in, because it's either right or it's wrong. There's no guesswork there. There's no good saying, it wasn't the table, it was a chair.
Mm-hmm.
But you see my point? They come through with, you have to be able to get your helper to see the way you think. And I see it as factual. What was it, this, that, or the other? And if they give you the detail in that order, then, as I say to Spirit, when I go into bat, I know that I got it right. That's all that matters to me. So it's not being arrogant.
No.
It's just being right. And when you think you've got, and we need to remember that you've got somebody with you on a private sitting, for instance, that desperately wants evidence. Well, you can't snatch it and say, right, okay, another £5, I'll give you some evidence. I've never worked for money. Never worked for money. Never will, because money doesn't matter. And what we're doing is people. And that's what matters in life. How you can help somebody get over the biggest hurdle they're ever going to have, of losing their loved one that's meant their whole world, and they didn't know it meant their own world.
Yeah.
They didn't know how much that person meant to them. And that person wants to come back to them. We haven't got the right to deny them that access. But what we do have the right to do is get the best access we can get and no hit and miss. So it's no good when I see mediums say, well, he was a tall chap, but he was a bit shorter when he sat down. I mean, I'm joking to a degree, but it's been sometimes evidence of that nature. And you think, well, come on, it's obvious that he's not getting the link he should get, the medium. So come on, let's get it right before we give it off. So I'd rather just turn around and say, look, it's not working as well as I would like, but this is what I've got. And make people realise that there's a degree of, how can I say, doubt about what might be coming through. But if you're sure that what you're getting is right, you still give it right. You get it right. You're not running it down. You're just saying, this is what I'm presenting to you. Here's a very good example. I remember a woman coming to me when I was doing private sittings at home. And I remember that she came to the door, and I remember she obviously she was in a very bad state, and she was desperately in need of a sitting. And I had a person with me at the time, and I couldn't give her a sitting actually for a couple of days. But I said, look, just calm down, have a little chat to me, go home, come back in a couple of days' time, and we'll see where we can go there. But during the time she was away, she decided that she would tell me when she came, or rather she would say she was so desperately in need that I and she agreed that we wouldn't mess about with any evidence. It was either going to be evidence or it wasn't going to be anything. So I'd rather have nothing than half-truths. You see what I'm getting at? And I remember when she came into the room, he said her son came in with her, and I didn't know at the time that her son had passed. And that's the one she was trying to make contact with. And the son had had a head-on smash into a car and been killed outright, you see. So I said, well, it's funny because I said, he wasn't French, was he? I said, because you're not French. No. So I said, well, where do I get Pierre? He said, that's what we used to call him. But you see, my first thought is your mind comes into it and says, no, she's English, so it can't be Pierre. So I got it wrong. Now, this is what a lot of mediums would do. We'd censor it. And that's the worst thing we can do, because it wasn't to be censored, although it did give us evidence. She was therefore keen to have more, which you can imagine. Anyway, he went on to say, this was November time, and of course, Christmas being December, they normally have a get-together. And he said to her, I'll bring you proof. And it will be, I'll get a flower, a pink potted flower, pink flower in a potted container, and I'll bring it to you Christmas Day. Now that's a son saying that to his mother as a promise for Christmas Day delivery. Well, that's out of the hands of any medium, isn't it? You've said it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What am I going to do about that? I've said it. It's on tape. People know about it. So I'm either right or I'm wrong. But this is why we've got to insist on saying to Spirit, look, I'm not going to look at Charlie. I want it to be right. So that's what he said. She went back, evidently. What was it? I then met her husband, obviously the father of Pierre, met the husband, and he and I were talking about something. I can't quite remember all the detail, but it was a meeting that we all went to on a certain occasion. And he said to me, you don't remember me, do you? I said, no. He said, well, I brought my wife that day with Pierre. I said, oh, yes. And of course, I still didn't remember, but I don't, it's like...
I know exactly what you mean.
So he said, when my wife told me that this pink potted plant was coming along, I thought, this is absolutely ludicrous, because he said, there's no way that's going to happen. Because he said, although my son was passed, I didn't think that you were the real thing. So I didn't think that what you said, I didn't think could possibly come right. So you best not say and talk about it. But he said, what I did do, I thought, if it's going to make her day, Christmas Day, then I love her so much, I'll go out and make it work. So he said, I went to a neighbour and asked her to buy the plant and bring it around Christmas Day. He said, Christmas Day, we were toasting my son, Pierre's health. The doorbell went. The lady came in and she said, I thought I need to bring you this. And she said, his wife, she absolutely collapsed in joy. It had happened. But he said, you and I both know it hadn't happened, because I was the one that had got the child. But he said, what I didn't know was 2 hours later, the door went again, and another woman who I didn't know, who'd lived in the town for some years, said, I heard of your bereavement. I was going past the shop today, and this is what I'd like to bring you. And it was a pink plant.
Wow. So
there's 2 plants. He said, now we've got 2. So he said, I'm sorry I doubted you, but he said, you must admit, he said, that was sticking your neck out. He said, really? He said, I felt it was going to involve me as well if we're not careful. But he said, I took the advantage of it. But he said, I wish now that I'd trusted. So I said, well, this is it. I said, trusting is another thing. But can you see the way in which, is that making sense?
Mm.
He built up and tried to save his wife the stress of going through the whole thing. And given double proof.
That is just blowing away, isn't it, really? Do you know, that's our
All my
spiritual
years of
work.
standing.
That's what I'm saying when they will double prove it.
Oh, definitely.
So they take it out of your hands. So if you've got the nerve to stand by them and say, right, I know I'm right, because let's face it, when I went into mediumship, I decided, I said, I'm not going to rely on my good looks. I said, that'll get me so far, but I said, there's a limit to what the hell is. But the truth is that you can't have a sense of humour to be a medium, haven't you?
Yes, definitely.
And they love it. On the other side, they like laughter.
Yeah, they do.
Because you can feel the atmosphere in a room, it just suddenly builds up. You get people laughing and joking. As can the opposite, sorrow, drops it.
100%.
And you tried, you don't need to explain it. It's either one or the other.
Mm.
So this is how truth comes through. Anyway, I felt that was probably, although it's a small amount of evidence,
It's a massive amount, though.
it couldn't have been clearer.
That's it.
What else could they do?
It's not a small amount, that is just 100% proof, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is them working at the best to prove to that lady, but not just to the lady, but to her husband.
No, that's the point I'm trying to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happened, they realised, I didn't know, he would not be the opposition, but he had to be helped as well. And he wasn't the one that was
Exactly.
apparently needing it, but he did.
We did need it.
And that's how spirit operates.
Really, yeah,
That's how they
definitely.
operate. And this is so beautiful when you think about it. So then you suddenly think, when you're in need yourself, I just hope that helper is around to help me, because that's a degree of help you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I laugh and joke with spirit a lot, like we all do. And there are sometimes when I really give them a bit of earache, because I hate not getting things right.
Mm.
But I've learnt that very often what you judge as right and wrong isn't quite correct. It's not quite as clear as that. So you've just got to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
But there we go. And I mean, I think they'll also guide you. Like I said about life story, they will guide you from one person to another, from one doorway to another, from one job to another. And things that you do, you think, no, that can never happen. That can never be. But yeah, it suddenly happens, and you suddenly realise that you are fulfilling something which they have told you you will do.
Yeah.
Which is like saying, in a way, and this is the danger we've got really. Because spiritualism was made in, as I would say, legally into a religion by an act of parliament, we've had a problem with somebody that says, does a reading and includes within it a little bit of your future. They can sometimes see a little bit of your future. And they're right, but because it's technically classed as a religion, legally you're on the edge and you shouldn't be using it. That can sometimes be a problem, because if you're teaching it as a subject, forgetting the religious implication of it, then the future thing can help. That can be acknowledged as being part of it. Because spirit know that there's a reason for you to walk a certain pathway. The problem is, because you're walking that pathway, you're not quite aware of it until you actually stumble on the stone that's in front of you. You think it's all clear path, and it might not be. And it's knowing that the time will come when you'll be able to walk that pathway with no fear at all. But sometimes you have to just take your time and look closely at the path before you walk. Does that make sense? That comes into it, because we all know what it's like to be tempted to do things that we know technically shouldn't be done. We go for it and we learn later that we were wrong.
Definitely.
And that's because we've taken the risk. But we still had to do it.
You're
So we
still
had to
learning
learn.
from it, aren't you?
Was you there at the start of the Arthur Finley College then? Was you at the start?
Oh, no. I remember did a reading for, because I did a reading. You see, I've done so many jobs. If I briefly just indicate to you what I've done, then you'll see why I get muddled sometimes. I started out as a heraldic designer for medieval coats of arms, painting them by hand and teaching. Then I went into education as a lecturer in art and design. Then I went out of that, and I went into the RAF for a few years as a pilot officer. Came out of that and went into selling for the Germans for another 5 or 6 years. Came out of that and went into being a medium and psychic for about 20 years. During that time, working from home, in that period of time, the door opens to many people that you just don't know are there. And they come through the door and suddenly you realise you've come a long way from actually being on parade in the RAF, just sitting in this chair, talking about spirit, when you can imagine what the average serviceman would think of that. In other words, it's been a very difficult road to follow, because it's not logical, but it's experience. And you get to a stage where I do remember being at home saying to Spirit, well, my job's gone, what have I got left? And next day I had a request by letter from a lady in Cyprus, could I do them a postal reading? And I thought, well, how can I do that? I've never done this before. And I sat down quietly, linked into the letter, and it proved to be correct. So I realised that had been sent to me by Spirit. So when that walk, they've taken me down another walkway now. And because I then got into it, I was working from home every day of the week. I was booked. And I'd have 4 or 5 people a day. Each one would be about an hour. So you get your practice then, because after 4 or 5 hours of sitting with one person, not one person, 5 different people, and then another 3 or 4 the next day and whatever, you begin to know a little bit about the subject. And I remember I had I don't remember the person very much, but I remember being told that that's right, I was told something about the college. And I said, no, I've never been there. And they said, well, one day you may hear about it or be able to go further into it. It's a place to go for a complete different holiday. And I remember getting this phone call, and it was from Stansted. I didn't at the time know what it was all about. And that was about 2 or 3 days later. And he said, my name is Gordon Egginson. He said, I don't think that means much to you, does it? I said, well, I'm sorry, no, it really doesn't at the moment. He said, well, your name was given to me by a friend of mine who came to see you a couple of days ago and had a private sitting. And they'd like to ask you if you'd like the opportunity to come and help work with us at Stansted. I said, well, yeah. He said, because I understand you were also a teacher. I said, yeah. He said, well, it's obvious to me that Spirit has been lining you up for this type of job. He said, now, they've turned you into a psychic that you can be used for here, if you're interested. And I went there, and they gave me a job part-time. And going there is like a new world, because there's no TV. The TV's there, but nobody uses it. You just, in the evenings, after you've had your meal, is just talking like this, sitting around in circles, chatting, having a chat to people, and gradually sort of realizing how little you know about the subject you're there to teach. Because the people that are coming there, students, have been in the business as long as you have, and they've experienced it in different ways. So therefore, when they exchange their views with you, they're teaching you. And in reverse, you come back to them, and you're helping each other, which is Spirit's way. And so therefore, it made me realize there's a lot more to Spirit than we realize in terms of making the world tick, the whole thing go round. And there I met, it was Gordon Higginson, Estelle Roberts, what was that?
Albert Best.
Albert Best, that was right, Albert Best. He was a funny character, a lovely chap. And several others that, I worked with over the years there, and they were all at different levels of belief and ability.
Did you work with Doris Stokes?
I didn't work with her. I had a reading with her when she first started out. And she used to go to the SAGB, Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, in Belgrave Square. And I remember meeting Tom Johansson there, that was the manager. And he introduced me to Doris Stokes. And he said to me, I'm not sure what you're thinking about her, he said, but she's a very good psychic. And she was actually, I thought, but again, who am I to say otherwise? I thought she's better at giving a psychic demonstration than the mediumistic. But again, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was doing what she did best. But she was very good in that respect. And she was the one that filled the Sydney Opera House.
Yes, she did, yeah.
When I went to her home for private sitting, and she was very down to earth. I met her husband there that was I think he was at Arnhem at the time, not at the time, but he'd been in the army, and her son who I met. And she was very ordinary Cockney girl, no doubt about that. Very ordinary in that sense. Not ordinary in the psychic sense, but definitely ordinary in her manner. Not at all, I didn't think, pretentious. But anyway, sufficient to say, yes, I remember her, but I didn't get connected to them as such, not permanently.
So who's the best medium you would say that you thought they're the one that,
Well, there's been over the years so many, I really would say that there are some mediums that I'm never going to see again, I would never remember their names, and I wouldn't want to say they're the best or the worst or whatever. I can honestly say that some of the most impressive clairvoyance and mediumistic work I've had was from people that have walked into open circles in churches, and I've never seen them again. And they haven't got a name, and they might never get known. But some of the clairvoyance that I've had from evidence from spirit has been spot on, and I could never. So therefore, we have to be careful here. Big names don't necessarily
Don't
mean they got
mean
it.
it. No,
Exactly.
they don't.
Yeah. Big names sometimes mean big egos.
Oh,
Sometimes, yeah.
Exactly.
This is the trouble with it. This is the trouble because, you know, as soon as you think you can walk on water, you better wear some wellies
Yeah, yeah.
because you're going to need it. I've seriously come to the. I mean, I lived in the Welsh Valleys for 10 years in a house, so it was all right. I thought he was going to say in the house, you know. The Welsh were really into spiritualism. There's almost a spiritualist church on every street corner. And I remember going to a church there, and it was an open circle where members of the public can walk in and sit in circle. The thing is, in that type of circle, you're not expecting phenomena because it's normally very dangerous to sit with people that you don't know if you're talking of phenomena. But you can sit in an open development circle, which is not physical, but mentally orientated, and that's easier to sit with and healthier. But even then you can get influenced by different levels of I'm not using the word ego loosely, but in different standards. And we have to be careful that we can be influenced by different standards. But this open circle is run in a church, and the one in Porth, Hannah Street, Porth, he came in and he gave me a reading out of the blue that was so spot on with what happened that day, names, conditions, and people, that there was absolutely no way that he could have been anything other than genuine. And he came to me with an answer that I wanted from Spirit, and had asked them in the afternoon, and they came to me at 8 o'clock at night and gave me the answer. So about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I asked the question. It took about 8 hours to get the answer, or 6 hours, whichever way. So in other words, they knew I was going to that church that night. They picked the person who came, you see?
100%.
And boom, hit. And you think, well, where was he? Oh, he's gone now. Where? Oh, he's gone. And they might never see him again. So what would you call that? I would say that's some of the best mediums you've ever seen.
Definitely.
They wouldn't have a clue who it was. Wouldn't have a clue.
So you did a lot of psychic then, didn't you? You did a lot of psychic. Were you involved with the Skull Project at one point then, did you?
No, the thing with psychic, see, what people don't realise, there are two elements to it. There's the psychic and the mediumistic. You've got to be psychic to be a medium. But you don't have to be a medium to be psychic. So the question is, there's nothing wrong with being a lowly psychic because they are the how can I put it? They're the real thing. They are the intuitive part of mankind, which is in touch with nature. So nature is really the psychic part of you. It's the early warning system. It's what the animal kingdom uses, and we call it intuition. We call it instinctiveness in human beings. But it's that is the element that means we can sit with somebody and say, do you know, that man you met yesterday that you made the loan to, blah, 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 you're not going to see that money again, blah, blah, blah. You can do a simple message like that, which can be spot on. But how do you know that? Because you're picking it up from them. How do they know it? Because they've done it. If they haven't done it, it's quite likely that they don't know it because it will never be registered. But it's registered in the aura, and you're reading into the aura, and the psyche is the part of that body which belongs to the spirit world. And that's the part that's often healed when people say about healing. Harry Edwards, who I knew for a short while, used to say to me, when you do healing, he said, you're readdressing the energies. And at the time I thought, what's he talking about? He said, everything in your body's got an energy. The heart, the lungs, liver, kidneys, they've all got energy levels. And spirit knows that, he said, so they tune the frequency to that energy level to do the healing that's necessary on that particular person. He said it might not work on the next person because they've got a different healing need. Do you think
Makes
of that?
sense that.
Do you think of that?
Mm.
Just like that, and it's just, and he was talking about a person where he was giving her a healing. He was telling me this. So you really suddenly realise this is so much to it. Where do you start?
Mm.
Nobody can stand up and say, "Look, I know that I know," or no, you don't know half of what you should know, because you've got to keep the doors open. So many people close the doors when they think they've made it.
Can never shut doors.
No.
Never.
And then they close down. So how can I put it? You have to be psychic to be a medium. There are degrees of difference, to be fair. And there are some psychics that shouldn't be practicing. And I worked on a case of Mark Antony in Wokingham, who was murdered. And I went to see, his mother asked me to go to see her. And I gave her a reading. Her son came through, but she was not ready to accept his death, because he'd only disappeared 3 days before. And I knew he was gone because he was with me. But how do I tell this to a mother that's in that fragile state? Now, this is what psychics have got to realise. They owe more than they realise to the parents and to the spirit people, because they might think, oh, I'm telling her the truth. They may be. But what God gives them the authority to make a statement like that to a mother that's desperately holding on to this life, to be told that her son is still alive. Now, it's the way you then open up the door that keeps that woman there. And I remember saying to her, do you believe in another life? Oh, yes. I said, do you believe it's... she understood what I was getting at. I said, there's no pain, there's no destruction, but I could walk into that other life if it was my time. And nothing would stop me from going. But love would help me to come back. But I might not be able to come back in the way that you would like me back. But I'm here all the same. Can you trust me? Oh, yes. Then her son came through and gave her evidence of what was in the bedroom and under the bed. And he said to her, if you believe what we've just discussed, then will you believe this? He said, ma'am, go into the bedroom. Under the bed, he said, there's a large painting. Across in an arc above the painting is the word butterflies. He said, in the centre, we've got butterflies painted. He said, you know that to be my painting, or you will do, because he said, although you might not know I left it there over a week ago. And he left it under the bed. Fortunately, I'd asked for the lady of the house, the one that was in need, to have a companion left with her. It was as if two ladies came together, because I didn't want one on her own. And she went in with her. Oh, she said, this is what you mean. And she came in, and there it was. And it had butterflies written across. Oh. And he'd come that day and told her, stood here, that that is exactly what she would find if she went into the bed. Now, she had not found that, because she hadn't been doing the bedrooms. Mm. She'd been looking for him for 3 days.
Yes.
Is this making sense?
Oh, definitely.
So he came in with something that she knew wasn't there 3 days. You know, how did this guy know that's just come to visit me? How did he know? But he knew because he's just been told. And if he's getting it from somewhere, where is it coming from? Mm-hmm. And if it's coming from spirit, what he's just told me about the spirit world must be right. And if it's right, can I find a little bit of time to grieve but gradually feel better about it because he's not dead. And if I don't accept what he's telling me, I shall make him unhappy. And I don't want him to be unhappy. So it's a healing process. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh,
But
definitely.
you see how a reading can be turned into something of a healing nature.
Yes.
And not just, I'm good because I gave you butterflies. That's not the point. The child said that butterflies were there before I died. But you don't know I put them there, and there they are. But I've told you since I've died.
Yeah.
And that's hopefully the way that we can make spiritualism, if you use the term that just solely, or mediumistic work, pay dividends and be taken and accepted by some of the scientific minds of the century. Because there's an awful lot of people out there still investigating it. And that brings you on to physical phenomena, because that is something else. Have you ever witnessed that?
No.
Mo will tell you, she's shaking hands with her.
Marjorie Clandon's brother.
Yeah.
Marjorie Clandon was an American doctor,
And her
spiritualist.
her brother was,
Walter Clandon.
yeah, he was
Walter Stinson.
killed in a train accident, I think. But he came through, and the guide of the medium said to Maureen, "Would you put your hand out?" And she did, and it was held by another hand, and it was warm, and it was solid, and he shook hands with her, and then introduced himself, and that
Said he'd
was
been dead 80 years.
80 years. He said, "I've been dead."
Wow.
But I smile and laugh, and I think it's I don't know what I used to drink at that time, but it was good back on it. But the truth is, you got to see the funny side of life to see the sad side of life. I can see how sad people would be to not have that evidence, but that evidence came through. Maureen's you've never forgotten it, have you?
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten at Stansted having.
Stuart Alexander.
Yeah, well, that was Stuart Alexander, who lives at Hull, who used to come to our home, and he'd do an impromptu demonstration, and he'd go into a trance state, and these figurines would come, and lots of things would come through that were, I was going to say, out of this world. Well, they are.
They are, aren't they? Yeah.
But he was somebody, because after I'd worked at Stansted for a while, I was invited to go onto the committee of the, what was it called? Yeah, my memory's gone.
You had TV, with Channel 5.
No, that was something else. No, I'm just like, what was that? Society that Robin Foy started.
The skull.
Not Skull.
Ark. No,
Noah's Ark Society. Sorry about that, but my memory's going at the point there.
No.
You lose track of various organisations. It was organised by about 4 or 5 mediums. Robin Foy, who's now passed, but he moved over here. There was Stuart Alexander, Colin Fry, and George Cranley, and myself, and we got together and we formed a committee, and we did demonstrations around the country.
and of course the one that died,
Colin Fry.
Robin Foy.
Yeah, and Robin Foy, that's
Sorry.
right. Sufficient to say that we would give talks and demonstrations, and in the demonstration we were helped by spirit to produce physical phenomena. And I remember them putting Stuart used to put a cardigan on him, didn't they? A jumper, like a cardigan. It would be oversewn all the way down, like a roughly sewn suit, to prove that it wasn't being taken off by spirit. But at the time when we were there, we thought, well, let's see how they do it. And they sat him in this chair, they turned the light down low. It was a dull red light. And then they turned the lights out for a few short seconds. When they put the light back on, the cardigan was gone, and it was over in the corner of the seance room on its own. And he had various items removed that they had done, Spirit had done, to prove to you that they were capable of physically manipulating the body. And on one occasion, they did the same thing again. But this time they said, we'll put the lights on, then we'll take them off and we'll put them on again. And look at the difference. And they did that. And as they turned the lights back on, you looked at the body, and half of his body sat in the chair had disappeared. And then they said, right, put the lights back, or the lights whichever way, they reversed them. They reversed the lights, and the body was put back, as it were, together. And the body could be seen to be one piece. But when they took it into the two parts, part of it has disappeared completely, which makes me think how marvellous an idea, how marvellous a method would that be for removing things like growths and tumours. We're dealing with an energy here that can do that. So why aren't we getting more results? Because we're not sitting with spirit long enough to do it.
That's the thing.
That's the problem. We're wanting to get on stage too quick. So look what I can do. Look, it's spade work behind the scenes. And that's good, going back to the old circle days. Because today, most people want to be on stage within 5 minutes of being declared a medium. Sometimes you never finish. So therefore, nobody can say, look, I know it all. I'm going to get up there and be Mr. Whatever. You aren't, because you'll get it wrong if you do. Just be interested in spirit. Be like a child going to your favourite program every week. Train up behind the scenes and wait for spirit to use you. And then it will use bits of you that they think they can at that time to do the job they've got to do.
Definitely.
But letting them take the initiative.
Take the lead into it.
Because they know where they're going with it. You don't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this has been quite a test for me because I've forgotten about a lot of these things.
So just to round up with the talk and then we saw the video, with what advice would you give to mediums that are up and coming? And obviously you don't have an ego, but what would you say if you was in teaching at Finley and a new student came in? What would you say the best way to get into spiritualism or get into mediumship? Or
Well, the thing is, I think there has to be an awakening of the medium's soul in any case. Because unless they have the sensitivity to allow a gift of that nature to come into their hands and to say goodbye to it if they have to, unless they've got that sensitivity, they're not going to be any good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about good, not just a demonstrator, but any good to anybody. Because the best doctor you can get is the one that knows they can't do it all, unless they have your confidence and they can do a lot more than they thought they could do. But they can only say to you, look, I do my best, but I'm not God, whatever God is. And that's another story, by the way. But the point is, if they have accepted that there are limitations that they have within their own psyche, then they are in a good position to be put into a school of training where they can be exposed on a regular basis to an element of the energy, because it's the energy of the psyche that keeps it all going. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Without that, they've got nothing, because it can soon dry up. I don't know if this, I wouldn't want it to sound like a threat, but it can be used in a subversive way as well. And some people can use their ability to the detriment of others. And that's sad, because there's a very strong energy that we call God, which nobody knows anything about. And the only reason we know there's a God is because we want one.
Been told.
You think about it. Because I mean, that sounds a bit callous. I don't mean it quite like that. We want backup, so we want somebody to pray to.
Yes.
You understand what I'm coming to? Because we're
Yes.
all weak, basically.
Yes.
We're all in need of this energy, so we call on God. But in actual fact, if we work on ourselves, we don't dismiss God, we just perhaps become closer to God by being linked to it. And the God force comes to the fore and therefore makes you more competent to do what you've got to do with other people. And that's where the God force comes in, as I see it. And that sounds very simple. I haven't got all the answers. If I was getting luncheon vouchers and more money, but the truth is, to me, that's people, because we suffer from the religious link, we're very often confronted with this God image. And they talk about, I mean, they'll have an earthquake and they'll all rush to the church to pray to God, please don't let it happen again. Well, my question to that is, why did it happen in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm well in, if God and I are like that, how come I was the one that got frightened? So God couldn't have been with me.
Mm.
But why would? And then you ask, was he with me? Yeah. Why was it he? Why?
Mm.
Because the mother can only be female.
Mm.
Again, we come into see, we start tying ourselves up in knots,
Definitely.
and we can get caught in it. So we got to say, look, I'm not going to get into that today, but that's another subject.
Mm.
When we look at it, where's God? And why are we saying, oh God, please don't let that happen? We might say it, but that's allowing for the fact that at that particular time we're reaching out from here because we're aware of the weakness that we've got here, which is probably down to our own doing. So that's why sometimes, coming back to the point, before you get a medium in a circle that can do any good, they've got to be able to recognize that they need the energy to be more resourceful within them. And all the circle's going to do is pull that energy out and shape it up. That's all it's going to do. It's not going to turn an ordinary guy coming off the street into a top medium. No, not going to do that at all. It's just going to say, what's he or she capable of? What can I use it for? Can I blend it with the rest of the circle? Can I make this circle work as one? Are they prepared to work as individuals as well as a circle? When you go to circles, what's the biggest problem is they all want to be individuals.
Mm.
I don't know if you'd agree with that.
I definitely agree with that, yeah.
They all want to
You're
say,
supposed to blend together.
this
and
is
everything.
where it's going wrong, you see. You can see it happening. You can't do anything about it because you can't make somebody, don't take me the wrong way here, but using a simplistic term, you can't make a person less greedy by giving them the rewards. You've just got to say, look, tackle life head on and see whether you need more than you think you do. And at some point in your life, you're going to need more than you've got. That's the way I see it.
Mm.
It can be summed up very much like I remember a serviceman telling me in the RAF one day. He said, "It's quite simple, really." He said, "If you're going to get yourself into a mess, make sure you can get out of it faster than when you got in." Because he said, "You've got to be either quicker running or don't get into the mess." And he put it in a slightly cruder word than that. But the fact is, it sums up life really. So coming back to our religious thing, what in the days of Helen Duncan, she could be imprisoned as she was and accused in the Old Bailey. And she was imprisoned for fraudulent mediumship. But she wasn't a fraud. It's just that they didn't believe that she should have been doing what she was doing on the open stage, so to speak, in her circles. So she was capable, but they didn't like her to be free. So they imprisoned her for a while. And Churchill even stepped in and said, what a waste of time this is, to waste time on a witchcraft act going back to those days, which he said is way out of order. He said to go back that far at times when we were going through a war that we are here now, which is far more important to mankind than a witchcraft act. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
He put it into perspective. He said that what we've got to get is get it right. And she was, I mean, I don't really know much about it, but she was a tough cookie. Oof. Yeah.
I've heard a lot about her, yeah.
She could crack a walnut without using it. So forget it. That sort of, she was, but she wasn't perfect any more than any of it. Well, I may be, but she wasn't. But the fact is that she was a very good. It's worth reading about her, just to recognise her determination. But they made her into, well, how can I say? She was made into almost like a villain, but she wasn't. She was doing her job as she saw it, and God bless her. And she used to charge 12 and 6 for a circle. And what happened on one occasion, she was holding this circle in some part of London, and there was usually about 24 people would go to it. And during the circle, which was physical phenomena, this young man materialized, and he was in naval uniform. This was in 1942, 43. It's certainly during the war. And he materialized, and he said that he'd just been killed on the hood. At that time, it had never been announced that the hood had been even attacked. It hadn't been released in the papers. Yet this lad could materialize and gave the details to the presumably circle.
Yeah.
So imagine, you've got two problems here now. You've got the orthodox religious people that says, can't have that. We can't have somebody coming back telling us that so-and-so can be killed or whatever that is. But also you've got the people that are saying this is a threat to security, because it means that people living in some part of London can know before the War Office knows that the ship has been sunk. And they had. He came back and he'd announced that he'd just come off the ship and his mates were all drowning. He was still there, but he was now, would see his mother some other day. Words to that effect. Effectively, what it meant was the ship was sunk, then it was released to the press, then it was announced worldwide that the British ship had been sunk. So she immediately became under suspicion. Where's this link between the German?
Yeah, she went to prison for that, didn't she?
Yeah, yeah. It's in these little chit chats that you pick up gems of info, which probably deserve more research because there's more to it than what I've just said, obviously.
Definitely.
But I just thought that she was fantastic for what she used to do.
Oh, yeah.
But these physical phenomena, mediums, usually are picked upon by spirit. Now, we've got a basement here that we converted. And since we've been down there, we've had the direct voice come through, and they've talked to us.
Wow.
And they speak to us. My mother does very often, not so much now. But when I'm sorry to say, yeah, I'm not well at the moment, and because my energy level is very bad, they're not using me like they used to. But they used to bring things through, and I know it can be done because they used to take me out through the head. And it's an experience that I can tell you is quite an experience. It's like being reborn each time.
Wow.
But having put that to you, well, I don't know why I'm getting off into this because it's too lengthy to get into in detail. But it's sufficient to say that we had evidence followed up later that the lady that spoke to us as we went into the room downstairs said, "Good morning, how are you?" And it was my mother.
All right, thank you.
Well, Ray, thank you very
Fantastic.
much for a fantastic interview with the church. This is for the church, so we can pass it out to the members. You're an absolute legend, you really are. And we can't thank you enough for giving us this insight to the wonderful Ray Bailey. It's a wonderful life, isn't it, Mr. Bailey?
Yeah. I mean, I keep telling
On the radio gets his wings.
I keep telling Maureen, my wife, I say to her, I really am perfect. It's just you can't see me. Without the flaws. But the truth is, yes, I appreciate what you're saying to me, and you've always been very supportive of what I do, and I appreciate that. What you mustn't forget is those people like yourselves that run that centre do every bit as much as any good medium when you do that. You keep that place. It's a lot of hard work. A lot of hard work. Just take some reassurance from Spirit that you are appreciated. But by helping us feel better about what we do, we put more energy back into the system, and it works well. And we all know that, don't we? Because we know what it's like. And you can't, it's like a chap used to say to me, he knew a healer that said, "Look, I've just done healing on your foot, but I've had to take the other one off for a little while. You've got to rest. But for 3 and 6 months more, I'll bring it back down, you won't limp home." And I think that's really down to earth, good stuff. That's what we need more of, isn't it?
Yeah,
I always made sure I had 3 and 6 in my pocket.
just in case. No, but thank you very, very much, Ray. Thank you.